Hello and welcome to an instructional video on how to play Javelin 4. This is the first video in a series of many videos devoted to taking Javelin 4 from Gold to Challenger. We'll start off quickly by taking a look at what runes and masteries we use on Javelin, so let's jump straight into it. The rune page is very simple, not too expensive, not too complicated. So for quintessences we have flat attack damage. For reds we take flat attack damage. For yellows we take flat armor, and we also take flat magic resist. You can, if you want, switch out the flat magic resist to magic scaling at level 18 if you prefer. Doesn't really make too much of a difference. You can also switch out the blue ones to maybe have 5 armor and 4 scaling health per levels, but this is a very simple page, doesn't need to be too complicated. You can use attack speed if you want, but pretty much you always get the attack speed that you need from Javelin's E anyway, so you don't really need to invest in attack speed all that much. For masteries, this is what we pick. We go 12 ferocity, 18 cunning. If we start with increased ability damage, again as before, you can take attack speed if you want. It doesn't really make too much of a difference, but we just do a bit more damage with our R EQ combo. Fresh blood, which is just good for ganking. We get natural talent as well, just for general gains over levels, and it's a bit better than lifesteal and spellvamp. And then we get the double-edged sword, so basically equals out to being 1.5% more damage. On this part of the tree we get extra damage to minions and monsters to make our farm a little bit quicker. We also get this because sometimes we like to duel as Javelin, just 1v1 invade against the jungler, so do a bit more damage. Merciless, so we can execute quicker. Javelin's primary role is to basically kill people as quickly as possible. Grandfather's Gift, we like to use the jungle, we like to be in brushes, so always make sure that you're utilizing this to the best of your ability. And also Precision, with the final option of Thunderlord's Decree, just for the increased damage. At some point in the future, in very high elo games, I may switch out and get Courage of the Colossus, but I think for the time being, Thunderlord's Decree is much better. You do a lot more damage, a lot easier to kill people. So that's the basics of Javelin. Let's go into a game now and talk a little bit about his skills. Okay, so now we're in game, let's quickly go over J4's abilities. His passive is Martial Cadence, which is the first attack against an enemy deals 10% of their current health as a bonus, which essentially means if you can open up all engages with an auto attack, you should be doing that, because 10% of their current health is very strong. This can only occur once every 6 seconds, but it basically means that Javelin has a lot of insta-kill potential. Every single time, by the way, you auto-attack someone and you get that first hit, it makes like a real nice thunking noise. I don't think that there's a way to see when you can recast it on someone. It's just, you have to guess. So it's not like Udyr's E, where you have a countdown timer to when you can stun again. His Q is Dragon Strike, which is sort of a skill shot. Basically lowers enemy armor, which is very strong, means you do more damage, shred armor. It's not for the longest amount of time, but can still be very useful. And it ties into his E, which we'll look at in a minute. His W is basically a shield, which gives you health based on how many people are around you, and it also gives a little bit of a slow. This is the thing that we level last, so it's not that amazing, but can be useful for when ganking to get a slow on an enemy and also keep yourself a little bit healthy in some situations. So Javelin's E is a pole that he puts down, or a standard. It provides you with passive attack speed, and it also gives attack speed whenever you put it down. At max level it's 25% attack speed, so it's actually fairly useful. If we look at attack speed, 25% attack speed is basically 600 gold, and that goes to everyone on your team. It's not as good as Blood Boil, but it's still pretty damn effective. And of course, the part that makes Javelin so strong is that he can use his EQ combo to knock up people. So if you do your E, so if you put your standard down and then you Q, it will knock up the enemies in that line. So it only knocks up the enemies in the line. And you can recast your Q as well to go back to your first standard. So the standard lasts for 8 seconds, and if you have 40% cooldown reduction, your Q lasts for 3.6 seconds. So there's the potential there within 1 second to do your E again. So I'll show you what that looks like. and then we press Q again, and we can go back to the same standard, and then it will disappear after. Typically, oh yeah, and ulti as well. So let's quickly go over the ulti. The ulti makes an impassable area of terrain. It's got quite a large range on it. You cannot be interrupted while in this animation when you jump, which is obviously a very, very powerful ability. People can flash out of it, Vayne can tumble through it, lots of other skills have managed to get through it. It does a lot of damage, so at max level with full build, obviously you have to be a bit careful with this kind of thing, because it's very unlikely I'm going to be in this situation, but it will do 700 damage to everyone in it. And I used to think that you did additional damage to people in your circle, but perhaps that's just wrong. It can be very useful, and we'll go over a few situations in future where using your R can be very, very powerful. But typically, what you want to do to start off and engage is, if you can, auto attack, EQ combo, they're running away, they're running away, hopefully you can bait the flash, and then you R in, and then you go. Obviously as well, flash, you kind of know what that is. We typically get Chilling Smite on J4 just to make his combo that much more devastating and helps with chases. We also typically always get Titanic Hydra, so just remember to use that for resets and that kind of thing. So when we auto attack, between auto attacks, we want to activate it because it acts as an auto attack, and we can just use that to kind of buffer our times. You don't want to use it just before you auto attack because it kind of glitches out and you just don't get optimal DPS. Anyway, I think that's enough on Jarvan's abilities. Now we'll go through basically how to build him and how to start. So when we load up into the game for the very first time, ignore this because we don't get this. We get this instead, so we get Hunter's Machete, pretty much what I get on my junglers, Warding Totem, and we almost always go 3 health potions. You can go refillable potion, and recently I have started to use refillable potion with Hunter's Potion because I think J4's jungle suffers from sustain and mana regen, so you can go that path, but I recommend getting the Hunter's Potion later. I pretty much always recommend getting 3 health pots. After playing around with it, I try to do it with refillable potion. I generally don't get good leashes, so I highly recommend getting the triple health pot because you want to be healthy for the first scuttle. So if we're on the blue side, pretty much the same route that I do for Nunu. We start at blue, we do wolves, we go over to red, and then depending on whether top is gankable or mid is gankable, we may do either one of those, or we may just go over to the Rift Scuttler and get him instead. On the red side, I pretty much always recommend this for every single jungler, but we kind of do the opposite. So we start at red, we go wolves, blue, and then to Scuttler. And then obviously depending on whether we can gank top, sometimes we'll use this little cone blast to go over here and then gank up this way. Go away, I'm not AFK. But you can't do this on this side, so it's a little bit less optimal. But then the trade-off is that you get red buff for a slightly longer period of time. What else do I want to say? Right, yeah. So on the first back, almost always we're going to be trying to pick up a Tiamat, but if you can't afford that, then obviously we can start building towards our jungle item. So you can get Stalker's Blade, you can get double longsword potentially, boots, obviously boots one, very, very important to get. J4 has really, really slow movement speed and no way to really speed himself up in the jungle, so he's very slow. I recommend getting boots 2 as quickly as possible. And then once we have our jungle item completed, I guess we pretty much want to be building towards Titanic Hydra, but guys, this is always adaptive, so it depends on the situation, it depends what the enemy's building, it depends who's strong in the enemy team. We can go Tarbis. Tarbis are very strong, even at the moment after the nerf, but Mercury Treads are also very, very strong, especially if the enemy team's got a lot of CC. The way I build Jarvan is slightly more damage orientated, so we're not going too tanky, but we're building items that kind of give us health anyway. So once we have these kind of 3 core items, what we want to look at building is sort of auxiliary items, so it depends on basically what the enemy's got. Black Cleaver is always good, and I say Black Cleaver is also part of a core build. So the last 2 items are basically up in the air. Deadman's Plate is very, very effective. I don't build Guardian Angel, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Maybe I should start building Guardian Angel. Let's have a look at some of the other items that we may want to get. So yeah, obviously Deadman's Plate, Frozen Mallet if you really, really, really want to be high on health and just stop people escaping. That's also a viable item. I wouldn't really go any more damage because I don't think you need any more damage. If you're absolutely stomping the game, you could maybe get Ghost Blade. I reckon that probably magic resist at some point is going to be useful. Ah, man, I got disconnected. Magic resist, obviously the options that we've got are the one that gives increased health regen. I'm trying to remember what it is. Can I go to collection and then items? I can. Let me just let's just have a look at this. Okay, so this should work. Why can't I scroll down any further? Alright, so it's loading them all up. So if we just go into magic resist, not magic penetration, so we can get Spirit Visage, more of the Malmortius, obviously a very powerful item if you're going against someone who's bursty. And also Locket of the Iron Solare if you want to be more team focused. So maybe if you've got a non-tanky top, maybe a Riven top or something like that, you'd want to go Locket, and a support, maybe like Support Brand or something that isn't building support items. Very rarely do you want to build Crucible, but if your support isn't doing a good job, you can always go Crucible. I think this item is only, yeah, it's not available in Summoner's Rift. Edge of Night isn't the worst item because it does give you movement speed, but it doesn't really give you much else, so I wouldn't recommend getting that. Scimitar, if you really want to load on the damage and you feel like you're getting CC'd and you absolutely have to carry and you're doing all your team's damage. You can go Warmog's Armor if the enemy team has a lot of health, but obviously this is all adaptive, guys. It depends on the situation, it depends on how well you're playing, it depends on how well the enemy's playing, so be adaptive in your items, but those 3 items that I mentioned at the start are probably the most important ones to get. So let's just go over that one more time. We typically always want to be getting the Warrior Enchant for the jungle item. We want to be getting a Tiamat that we then build into Titanic Hydra, and then Black Cleaver. But obviously this is always adaptive. Sometimes we may forego the Black Cleaver and get a Randuin's Omen if the enemy AD is absolutely chomping. It really just depends. So be adaptive, be free, but I highly recommend getting a Warrior Enchant, a Titanic Hydra, and tier 2 boots as soon as possible at an absolute minimum. And of course, guys, always remember, when you're level 9, you should pretty much always be getting Oracle's Alteration and Control Wards. If you're not buying Control Wards, you need to start.